We also confer an honorary degree upon Dr. Irving Abella in acknowledgement of his significant accomplishments as an academic, as a community leader in Canada and around the globe. I am personally delighted to welcome him to this convocation. To present our distinguished candidate, I now call upon Dr. Vicki's Faculty of Social Science,
Dr. Irving Abella is widely recognized for his scholarly work on the Canadian labor movement and the history of Jewish Canadians. He is perhaps most well known for a book about Jews fleeing the Nazis who never had a chance to become Canadians. None is Too Many, Canada and the Jews of Europe 1933 to 1948, co-authored with Howard Troper, was published in 1983 and reissued most recently in 2013. This book, of enduring importance, highlights how little the Canadian government did for Jewish refugees between 1933 and 1948. Official statistics suggest that fewer Jewish refugees entered Canada during this period than entered any other Western country. One salient example of this disregard for the lives of these refugees was the fate of the MS St. Louis, a ship carrying over 900 Jewish refugees from Germany in 1939. This ship and its passengers were refused entry to many countries, and Canada, its last hope, similarly refused to allow the refugees to land. The MS St. Louis was forced to return to Europe, where many of the passengers died. The title of the Abella and Troper volume speaks to this issue, based on the response of an immigration agent who was asked how many Jews would be allowed into Canada after the war. His response was, "None is too many." What is important about the Abella and Troper book is not only the historical detail it provides, but the message it presents to Canadians. As a country with relatively favorable attitudes towards immigrants and immigration, we may pride ourselves on our tolerance. But we must not become too complacent in an era in which refugee claimants are still dehumanized and viewed with suspicion and distrust by many Canadians. In response to the arrival in British Columbia of a ship carrying Tamil refugee claimants from Sri Lanka in 2010, a national poll found that a full 63% of Canadians endorsed the view that the ship should have been turned back and not allowed to reach Canada. This, despite the fact that most Canadians had little knowledge of who these refugee claimants were and why they were willing to put their lives at risk to come to Canada. Perhaps None is Too Many should be required reading for all Canadians. Irving Abella was born and educated in Toronto and is currently professor of history at York University. He has published over 100 articles and authored or co-authored 7 books. In recognition of his many contributions, he has been made a member of the Order of Canada, a Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada, and a member of the Order of Ontario. He is the current president of the Academy of the Arts and Humanities of the Royal Society of Canada, the former president of the Canadian Jewish Congress and of the Canadian Historical Association, as well as former chair of Vision TV and of Canadian Professors for Peace in the Middle East. Irving Abella is known for his commitment to the principles of social justice and tolerance. Mr. Chancellor, on behalf of the Vice Chancellor and in the name of the Senate, I ask you to confer the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, upon Irving Abella.
By virtue of the authority vested in me as Chancellor, I admit you to the degree of Doctors of Laws, honoris causa. Congratulations, Dr. Irving Abella. Irving. Let's do a picture. On behalf of all assembled here today, I should now like to invite our newest alumnus, Dr. Irving Abella, to address Convocation. Dr. Abella.
Mr. Chancellor, Mr. President, graduates, relatives, friends, guests, thank you for so warmly and generously welcoming someone who spent most of his life at a university down the 401 at York University into the Western family. I am particularly delighted to have this degree bestowed on me by two good friends and great Canadians, Chancellor Joe Rotman and President Amit Chakma, each of whose life stories symbolizes what I have to say to you this afternoon. First, let me congratulate all of you who are graduating today on having completed your educational odyssey. I salute your stamina, your dedication, and your success. I'm sure that each one of you in the past few years has had confrontations with fatigue and wondered whether the tremendous effort was worth the expenditure of energy, time, and dreams. It was. This country needs you. It needs your ideas. It needs your contributions. You have now become members of this country's intellectual future. Each of you now has the tools to contribute to the creation of a just and tolerant community. And with that equipment, you each have a responsibility to use it wisely and fairly in whatever direction your talents and interests take you. As you have heard, I am a historian, and as a historian, my role is to shine a flashlight on the past, to expose events and people to public scrutiny so that we may pay homage to what has made us great and to pay heed to what has held us back. I became a historian of Canada because I love this country and what it stands for. Yet there are things in our past which are maddening and have outraged me, and there are others which are glorious and have inspired me. It is important as you leave here today to take your rightful place in Canadian society that you acknowledge them all, to remember who we are and what we once were, and then to focus, as you must do, on what we want to be and how to get there. Remember as you begin the next step in your careers that justice and tolerance have a long history in this country, but so do injustice and intolerance. And unless we pay attention to the injustices history reveals to us, we will not be able to create an environment in which justice can flourish. Not so long ago, the Canada that Chancellor Rotman and I grew up in was a far different country than it is today. Then it was a country permeated with racism and intolerance, xenophobia and anti-Semitism. Justice for many was only a distant dream. Minorities, especially Jews, were the pariahs of Canadian society, targets of abuse, demeaned, despised, discriminated against. They were totally excluded from most professions and found it difficult to get jobs in others. They faced quotas in most universities and schools, confronted restrictions in most sectors of the Canadian economy, were legally prevented from living and vacationing in many parts of the country, and were even barred for a time from entering Canada as well. They were not alone. For much of our history, and you should remember this, Canadian immigration policy has been racist and exclusionary. We knew what kind of people we wanted and how to keep out those we didn't. For our first 100 years as a nation, Canadian immigration acts were so designed as to divide the world into two: the preferred races, and the phrase was actually preferred races, white Christian Europeans and Americans, who were always welcome in Canada, and the non-preferred races, those from Asia, Africa, South America, the Caribbean, the Middle East, and elsewhere, who were effectively barred from entering Canada. It was not until the 1960s that Canada finally abandoned her racial discriminatory policies and welcomed newcomers from places that had never been recognized as potential sources for immigrants. And wonderfully ironic, given our history, the vast majority of those who have arrived in Canada over the past 50 years to begin their lives anew are precisely from those countries that had been considered off limits before. And what a contribution these newcomers, including your own president, have made to this country. They have helped create a new nation whose watchwords are now tolerance and openness and diversity and generosity of spirit and decency. And your task as graduates of this magnificent university is to protect and enhance their achievements. Over the past generation or two, we have created a unique country, and what makes us unique is our pluralist culture. The Canadian mosaic is our national cliche. It is our single most important characteristic. Here, all of us, the country's so-called founding races of British and French origin, plus Europeans and Asians and West Indians, Africans, Catholics, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Sikhs, and others, arrived trailing our own roots, which are now firmly transplanted into the fertile new soil of the country of Canada. And along with the First Nations, we have built a new country. What makes us so unique, what makes us so special, is the unwritten compact that bigotry will not be condoned, that instead of abusing one another, we always talk out our problems and sometimes even our prejudices. We are unique as well because we not only do have freedom from speech, we have freedom from speech. Unlike our neighbors to the south, we do not allow hate mongers to peddle their poison publicly. We protect our minorities because we respect both their contributions and their sensitivities. And yet, sadly, those values that define us as a nation are under attack. It is clear that intolerance is on the rise throughout the world. We see it everywhere. We hear it on the ubiquitous talk radio shows. We watch it on television or on YouTube. We feel it. We don't need public opinion polls to corroborate it, but they do. Intolerance, it seems, is a growth industry of the new century. Of course, 9/11, the growing scourge of terrorism, and those tragic events that occurred yesterday in Ottawa have set off alarm bells throughout Canadian society. But we must not allow legitimate concerns about security to become an excuse for intolerance. Remember, finally, in whatever you choose to do, to let history be your guide. But also keep in mind, it will be your judge. Let your actions be guided by how you wish history to record them. To those of you who are graduating today, be proud of what you have achieved, and be very proud of the country in which you achieved it in. Your task over the past few years as you go out and set the new national agenda for Canada is to defend its values, to expand its vision, and to never, ever forget its history. Thank you once again for the great honor of allowing me to share this wonderful day with you, and good luck to each and every one of you. Thank you.